Today we're going to carve a great horned owl out of this stump, and this is my first grandchild carving day, meaning that I carved a great horned owl for a customer, somebody else saw it, and they wanted one too. So it's fun to see my children having children, so to speak. And I'll get started here with some of the details. This piece is just what I happen to have. It's green cut. What is this? Red oak that I harvested a few months ago from a neighbor's backyard. So it's still pretty wet, and I'm going to try to keep it wet during the carving to eliminate some unnatural chucking and splitting. Let me grab my camera here and show you the tools and the safety stuff and the pictures that we're going to use to get this started. Thanks for joining me. We have the carving tent here, and we've got my jaw horse, which is gripping and keeping the log in place. I'm going to be putting on these chaps for the protection of my legs, ankles. I've got some gloves to help prevent injuries to my hands. I've got my helmet to keep the junk out of my eyes and my ear covering. And then I'm going to be using this lightweight Echo, the CS 3510. It is a climber saw with a rear handle. I use the rear handle for fine tuning of where the blade goes. So I did not want a top handle climbing saw, but the climbing saw is great because of the weight. This saw, completely wet, I think that's the right term, when it's got gas and oil in it, is about 9 pounds. And that really helps with the fatigue, for particularly my forearms is what I struggle with the most right now. Hopefully that will lighten as time goes on. So what we're going to do is go off of these pictures here, and this is the great horned owl. I found these online from a website that no longer exists, which fascinates me, how I found them and why they're still out there when the website is down. But nevertheless, that is what happened. I understand that whatever we put out there on the web actually never goes away. And these are perfect for me. You can see here the dimensions. It has them in, you can see 0, 8, 16, 24, so on. And each of those represents an inch. So I'll be able to make some marks on the top of my stump to get the sidewalls off. And I'm gonna actually make a square cylinder, if that's such a word. It'll be square on top, it'll be a column, and it'll come down as far as Mr. Owl's, the back of his tail here. And I'll cut it square on this side, turn me and cut it square on this side. Then I'll come back in and make some of these cuts to try to get off all of the excess for the blocking. That's where we're headed next. I got through measuring here, and you can see my log is not as big as I had hoped it was. It's only 9 inches across this direction, and it's 10 inches across this direction. And I needed 10 by 11 and a half. Then I've got no problem coming down through here. Here is 23 inches for its height. And sometimes you find a natural feature that will be your mark. But I wanted to be a little more accurate this time, so I went ahead and made a marker across some of this blanket here so I can see the color where it should be. And then you'll notice that it gets thicker as it goes down. So we might be okay. The part of the owl that requires the 11 and a half inches is down in here approximately because of the tail. As it swoops out, that might be okay. So let me show you over here on the drawing. This one needed to be 10 inches across. And so I'll use the 9-inch direction, because I'll be able to just make him a little younger of a bird, perhaps, by taking a little bit off of both sides and only making his total back here 9 inches across. And then, and I might get a little more than that because the stump gets bigger the further down it goes. Then over here, this one required 11.5, and I only had 10 inches. So you can see here where the 10-inch line intersects the owl is right here. So if worse comes to worse, and it really isn't but 10 inches when I get there, I'm gonna have to scoop this in a little bit and cause his tail to be more tucked down like this instead of sticking out like that. Maybe a little less authentic perhaps, but just really depends on how the owl's sitting. If he's got a different grip here and he's sitting up a little straighter, then I suspect his tail would tuck tight. Not pretending to be a naturalist here, but just thinking about balance and center of gravity and where their legs are. So I think I'm gonna aim to have him sit upright a little bit more and tuck that tail down, and then the dimensions won't matter. So there's the details. And I wanted to show you a couple other things while I'm over here. Just to help me with three-dimensional. He's kind of mashed right now, you can't see it very well, but I made this, just cut it out of paper and snipped and taped just to give me a better feel for what three-dimensional might look like before I get into the cutting with the tools. Because you know, once you cut the wood, you either have an accurate cut or you have a new design feature, pun intended there. And then I made this mask for when the wood is flat, and I cut out the eyes and a couple of little lines where the beak is, so I'd get a good idea of where to start on the details of the face. So there we have it for now. I'm gonna fire the saw up and get the bark off of this. And when I get down so far, just taking the bark off, maybe see how it starts to get thicker. Whoa, windy out here. See how it starts to get thicker right down here? I might actually have to box this off a little bit when I get down this far, because it might really give me my 10 by 11.5. So we'll see. So I'm just gonna start with getting the bark off down to about right here, and then I'll measure the circumference, do a little math, and figure out what the diameter is and what I need to do about boxing that off.
rest of it up. Come back and see you in a minute.
Alrighty, there we go. Bark's off. So I suppose if this was a dogwood, we removed the bark, it wouldn't be a dog anymore. I don't know. Normally, if the log was big enough, when I block it, all of the bark is removed anyway. But in this case, because the log is just barely and maybe even just a little too small, I had to cut all the bark off to see what I've got. Now, also another normally is I carry like a cloth tailor's tape for just a time as this, and I can't find it. So for now, I'm going to have to roll my metal tape around inside out because it just wraps better, makes the circle better when it's inside out. And it comes out to 34 inches in circumference. The reason I need to know the circumference is because clearly I can't stick my tape measure through the log and see how far it is from one side to the other to get the diameter. So I plugged in the 34 inches into a calculator I found online, and it was told me it was 10.8. Well, 10.8 inches is get pretty close to 11. So I might be okay to let the tail of the great horned owl fan out like it is in the picture, and we'll be okay. So I'm gonna go ahead and start drawing on here and get him on here and show you how I get started. I'm gonna draw a front face like I showed you earlier in the paperwork, and then I'm gonna do a side face and show you what that means and why I do that. So essentially this method, I call it the draw and carve, draw and carve, draw and carve. You can intuitively just say, okay, this is where I want the head to start. I'm gonna cut this away because it's not part of the head. You get the proportions, and then with the proportions of the head, then you can say, okay, the body's probably gonna be this big, cut away what's not supposed to be there, and just size it and feel your way through it. And that's awesome. That's kind of like playing by ear on the piano without music. I'm gonna show you the method that is more like playing by music. I'm gonna draw the face on this side and the corresponding face at 90 degrees, and then calculate how, when I cut the blocking on this face, not to damage a needed piece from this face. And then of course, when I get through cutting this out, blocking this out, then this art is all carved up. Then I come back over here and I draw it back in again and cut it this way, and then that messes this art all up. But as you go and you move closer and closer and closer to the object that you're carving, you'll need less and less to draw. You might do something like the placement of the eyes or the placement of the beak to get the proportion of the head right, because it's really important to get the head to look like the head of what you're doing if you want people to recognize what it is. Like one of my first bears I did looked so much like a pig that I had to start over again. I mean, I didn't tear it up, it didn't become firewood, but I just had to carve it smaller and smaller and smaller, and I had a much smaller bear when I got done because the dimensions were off. The distance between the ear and the snout, the way I carved the chin, it just didn't look right. It looked more like a pig. So you got to get the dimensions and the relative spacing of each of the features of the face and the head accurate, and then you can build the rest of the body. So I'm going to show you that method. It's kind of like playing by music, and we'll get started on the drawing now, and I'll come back after I get part of it done and show you how it's coming along. To get this method started, when I was off camera, I went ahead and changed this line to this line here so that it was at 90 degrees to this one, because I'm literally going to put a face here on this side and one at 90 degrees perfectly on the other side. That's the way my art is laid out. Now, since this side is going to get wider down here at the bottom, that's going to be the side that is the picture that's 11.5 inches. This side over here, since it is more narrow, is going to be the side that is the 10 inches. So I started up here, and I like to take my tape measure and just let it dangle. I attach it here, and then just kind of let it do its thing to try to let gravity be my plumb line. And then I'll hook it on there, mash it flat at the bottom, and draw that straight line. Now that is my center of the drawing, is that line. And what I did is I came down 23 inches like the drawing says, and then at 23 inches I made a couple of marks. The tail is 3 inches across, so I put 1.5 inches on either side, and then basically sketched in that little bit of a scoop of a tail there on the bottom. And over here on the drawing, this is what it looks like. So I came down 23 inches right here, and you see here on this one that the tail is a little more than 1.5 inches on this side and a little less on this side. But I go ahead and square the drawing up a little bit best I can, so that I'm more accurate and I know where I'm at. So I came down 23 inches here. I drew this blue center line, so for reference, and then I drew the bottom of it for reference. And you can see this is the one that's 10 inches across. This one here is the one that's 11.5. So I'm gonna go over on the other side, and I've already drawn this center line. This, you can see it here. The line down the middle is a darker blue. It's not showing up much here on camera. It's this one right here, if you can tell. And I've run that one down the middle. And what I'll do here is I'll find out where this point is. Where does the wing cross that center line, and I'm gonna mark that. And then I'm gonna find how far out does the wing go from there, how far out are the claws from there, and I'll make those 2 points. Then I'll come down a little further and figure out how far down here the extremity is, the furthest one down, and I'll mark the center line here, count out, and put a dot there. And then I'll freehand it a little bit and use those dots as my point of reference to figure out how it's supposed to look down at the bottom on that side.